Hello guys, welcome to another lesson on Bytes Code. So in our previous lesson, I made mention of we doing something based on HTML forms. But then I would like to talk about HTML attributes and also talk about CSS before we move on to forms. So in our previous video, I said HTML attributes are elements that provide additional information about the element or the tag. They consist of a name and a value separated by an equal sign. So to illustrate what I'm saying, I'd like to write that on notepad. So we have element, then the attribute follows. So the attribute separated by an equal sign, then its value. Right. So this is the syntax for HTML attribute. So HTML attribute can consist of styles. They can consist of title, href, source, alternative. They can even consist of width and height. And the most widely used ones are the HTML attribute styles. So a style syntax also looks something like this: element, which is the HTML tag, then our style, which is the attribute name, then its value right here, then its value. All right, so to illustrate this with a style, we can have an element, let's say h1, and a style of font size. Perfect. So this is the syntax for attribute styles, and this is the syntax for attribute itself. So HTML attribute follows the first syntax, and style, which is a type or an example of an attribute, follows the syntax. So talking about CSS or cascading style sheets, there are three types of cascading style sheets that we can use, or there are three types of CSS. We have one which is the inline CSS. Let me clear this once. We have one which is the inline CSS, and we have internal CSS or internal style and external style. So this is an inline style. We have external and internal styles. I'll be illustrating that on VS Code very soon. But before we do that, I would like to explain what CSS is. So CSS is a styling language used to control the layout and appearance of web pages written in HTML. So CSS also has a syntax that is quite different from HTML. So CSS follows this syntax. It has a selector, and curly braces or curly bracket follows the selector name. Opened, then we have our value and our property inside. So property follows, separated by a colon, and its value, and a semicolon ends this. So this close curly bracket ends our selector, or it's more like writing this in HTML. So this represents a close tag, and this is an HTML close tag. So in CSS, we use curly braces instead of angle brackets. All right, so selectors here can have different names or different forms. We have a selector which makes reference to our HTML tags, We have selectors which makes reference to classes. We have selectors which makes reference to IDs, and we have a universal selector. So let me clear this and illustrate what I mean. So selectors. So making reference to our HTML element, you can have selector like a body, then we have its property separated by a colon and its value. And we have the universal selector, which is the asterisk sign, which is for universal selecting. So same, let me just copy this and paste here. We have the next one, which I said the IDs selector. So what follows the IDs is an asterisk sign. So an hash, then the ID name. Let's say mine is just ID, and the property and its value. Then we have the class selector, which begins with a dot or a full stop, and this. So these are the various types of selectors we can use in CSS, and we are going to be doing some practicals on Visual Studio Code very soon. So let's just keep this in mind. We have the element or tag selector, we have the universal selector, the ID, and the class selectors. All right, so let's launch our Visual Studio Code and begin with something. So this is my code from last time's lesson. All right, let me open this with Lifesaver. Okay, this is the assignment I gave you guys on the last lesson. I hope you guys were able to do it. Okay, let me clear my code. Start. Okay, so let's begin. Starting with HTML attribute, we have header, and I have an H1 and my name, it's code here. All right, save and refreshed. Okay, okay, so let's continue. So I want to give my header element rather, not a selector, an attribute. So let's say style attribute, of course, and the style of a background color of, let me see, aqua. All right, so this is what happens. Let me increase this style here and font size 100 pixel. Okay, perfect. So font size here, the measurement varies. We can have measurement in pixels, inches, centimeters, millimeters, viewpoint, etc. So let me see if, okay, so these are some of the examples. We have PC, PT, PX, cap, R cap. So I can just use PX for now. Let me just use PX and save this. Let me see what happens when we change this. Let's see what happens when we change this to 100%. So 100% means it takes the width of our header. Let's say we give this header a width of 500 pixel. No, 500 is too big. 200 pixel, and a height of 300 pixel. Okay, so this is what happens. So we can just play around with our measurement to see what happens. Okay, let me clear this one out. Save. Maintain this too. Nice. Okay. So this is an example of attribute. So it has the attribute name, which is a style, and separated by an equals sign. Then its values follows in a quotation mark, surrounded by a quotation mark here. So this is also an example of an inline cascading style sheet. This here is also an example of an inline cascading style sheet. Let's use an internal style sheet and see what is meant by an internal style sheet. So to start an internal style sheet, we put our cursor at the end of the title tag, the closing title tag, hit enter, type style to open the style tag, enter for just indentation, and clear this one out. I'm going to do the same over there and see what happens. So to begin, let's use our element selector first. So our element selector, what elements do we have here? We have a header, so header followed by our curly braces, open it up, then our property and its value. So our property, we set the background color and its value, we set aqua. Save that, see our change. Nice. Our next selector here is h1. So to type the h1 or to reference the next selector, you come outside our previous selector. So outside the curly braces, the end of the curly braces, the closing curly braces, which is this right here, you come at the back or outside it, hit enter, then type the next selector, h1, followed by set of curly braces, and we said this one has a font size of 100 pixel. All right, so it works. So this is an example of this right here is an example of an internal style sheet. So an internal style sheet. We'll be doing an external style sheet very soon, but before we do that, let me add one more thing here, which is body. Let me change the color. Body. Change the background color to my favorite color, this. Nice. Save this. All right, so guys, this is an example of an internal style sheet. You can write an internal style sheet inside your HTML code, but the more preferred one is an external style sheet, because when you use an external style sheet, it makes your HTML code shorter and easier to read as compared to using an internal style sheet. Imagine you're writing hundreds and thousands codes right here, and in addition you're writing another hundreds and thousands of internal style sheets. You're going to find it very difficult to read your code. So there is another way of doing this, which is an external style sheet. And to do an external style sheet, you create an external file inside the folder which keeps our HTML file. So let's do that. So Control B to open our Explore panel. Come to this icon, which is a new file icon, and create a style. Name our file style dot. What extension are we using? CSS, because it's a style cascading style sheet. Hit enter. All right. So close our panel. Our style sheet has been created, but then there's no code here. So when I cut this and save, nothing happens. And the codes I just cut from this place, I can paste it here and let's see if it works. Right, just pasted it, but then nothing happens. Why? Because I haven't linked my style sheet to my HTML file. So let's do that too. So how do we link an external file to the HTML file. So to do that, inside our head, yes, inside our head. Oh, why do I keep closing this? Yeah, inside our head over here, you can add a link right after the title or even before the title. So let's add it after the title. So a link, and what type of link are we using here? We are using a CSS link, which is the third option. One, two, three. This one, this very one. So CSS link. All right. So this is a relation attribute. So the relation attribute here describes or defines the relationship between the HTML file and its external file. So what relationship do these files have? They have a style sheet relationship, and the href here, which stands for the hypertext reference, is the destination file. So this defines the destination of our file. So where is the file? So the file is in our, okay, I just saved my work and the effect just took place, but then I was explaining where the file was. Okay, so control B, the file is in our bytecode folder. So that is where the file is. And what is the name of the file? So href, what are we referencing? We are referencing style.css. So you are just going to name it exactly the way you just saved the file. So imagine I change my S here to capital S and save it. Okay, nothing happens. I wonder why. All right, it works. But then in different instances, the file doesn't work because the namings are different. So in this case, it works. So let's just keep our code like that. All right. So this is an external file or an external cascading style sheet file. So we can write our CSS codes here, save them, and it will take place exactly over here. Okay, so trick number 2 when using VS Code. Just saw how I kept clicking on the tabs to switch, how I kept clicking to switch tabs. There is an interesting way for me to split screen on my VS Code. So to do that, I want to push a CSS style sheet file to the right side of my screen in VS Code. So to do that, you hold Control and Alt key and the arrow key to the right, and it pushes my style sheet to the right side of the screen. Want to send it back, pushes it back. So Control Alt, then the back arrow key, Control Alt right arrow key pushes it to the right, Control Alt back pushes it to the original position. All right, guys, so this is just a short video on CSS and HTML attribute. So in our next lesson, we'll be talking about HTML forms and how to insert images into our web browser. See you guys in the next lesson. Bye. Alright guys, so these are my social media platforms. So on GitHub, it's Fortran Byte. On Facebook, it's Byte. And on Instagram, it's underscore Byte. So GitHub will be used to upload the files we use for our works. So I'm going to be posting all the files we use in our works. In case you want my code, want to compare my code to your code or to make corrections, I'm going to be uploading the files on GitHub. Aside that, if you want a one-on-one interaction, question and answers, or to follow up on my post, you can follow me or check my pages on Facebook and Instagram. You can also send any questions you have concerning web development to my Instagram page. Okay, see you in the next video.